Welcome to Changing the Conversation. This podcast explores the mix of diversity, culture and tech innovations in our industry. Join us as we sit down with trailblazers, thought leaders and innovators who are reshaping the landscape of insurance, bringing you stories that redefine the narrative. We are your guide to the evolving landscape of insurance. This is Changing the Conversation, brought to you by Mackay.
Welcome to Changing the Conversation. Good afternoon, Howard. Thank you very much for joining me today in the studio to talk all about the Insurance Museum, which I'm very excited to hear about. But I wonder if we can start off with a little bit of background about who you are and what the Insurance Museum is.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks for having me here. Really looking forward to this. I've been looking forward to it for weeks. Yeah, the Insurance Museum the project's been going for quite a few years now. But it was about 2020 when it was set as a charity, set with a board, bit of funding coming in, and since then we've been really working hard at getting a museum set up in London, in EC3, and then we can start telling that global story of insurance. But as for myself, I think I have to point out straight away from the top, I'm not an insurer. I don't have an insurance background. I'm actually a heritage professional, so I've been working for the past 25 years for the City of London Corporation. I was working in the archives, Guildhall Library. I worked in museums. I was managing the Billingsgate Bathhouse, Roman Bathhouse, and the London Amphitheatre, Roman Amphitheatre, as well as the City of London Police Museum. So I've got a bit of knowledge about the City of London. I've got a knowledge, of course, heritage, museums, archives. That's my background. That's what I live and breathe. So when this job popped up, I thought, that's interesting. And they snapped me up, and I haven't really looked back. So I've been doing this for about 2 to 3 years, and honestly, it's great fun. It really is great fun.
Well, there's so much history around the insurance industry, particularly Lloyd's. What kind of historical stories do you have that you feature that might intrigue or interest the seasoned insurance professional? What kind of things have you come across in the last 2-3 years when looking at this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. When I first came in to this, the first thing that really hit me was how much history there is. The history and heritage of the insurance sector is so broad and so deep, it's difficult to know where to start. It really is. But over the past few years, I've been sorting out in my head, thinking about, okay, if we do an exhibition on this, we do an online exhibition on that makes sense. I've been sort of sorting out narratives in my head. But a few things that have really hit me. One was something I sort of discovered recently. It's actually a document in Milan, in the Mansuti Foundation. They sent me a book, a catalogue of all their items, and I've been sifting through it. Look at this, it's amazing, wow. But I found something that was a contract that dates from 1564, and it's a contract for insurance. And it's insuring a ship from Venice, travelled from Venice, all the way through the Mediterranean, round up to London, and it docked in London in 1564. And the contract is insuring the cargo, which is mainly of, believe it or not, mainly of currants. And then in the 16th century, currants were a real high-end good. Imagine you need to grow grapes, you need to dry them. That's all a Mediterranean environment. That wouldn't happen in Britain or Northern Europe. So it has to be transported up to this neck of the woods. And I'm just looking at this document. Even though it's online, I was looking at it on the screen, just looking at this document, I thought, wow, look at that. This is somebody's handwriting from the 16th century, from 1564. This is someone in Venice in that year. And this ship, they're writing about this ship that sailed all the way to London. And I know that where it would have docked is just not far from where all the insurers in London work, in EC3, just on the waterfront there, and unloaded its goods. And then probably it filled up with something else, wool or maybe something else, and then went back to Northern Europe, and then it went back round to, this continuous story of trade and insurance. And when I see something like that, it really stops me in my tracks. And it did then. I looked at it and I was in awe of it.
Do you know, I've often thought in a previous life or in another life, I would love to be a historian. And there's a series of books that I always read. They're my go-to. And it's all about 17th century Scotland and the Jacobite Rising and things like that. And it's historical fiction, but it's based in fact. And I often wish if I could just go back in time, just for a day, just to see the person that wrote, their handwriting. They lived, they happened. I find it absolutely fascinating. And London is so steeped in history. And my background is legal. So I used to love wandering through all the legal kind of areas of London and just think about how many people had done this before me. And I just find it fascinating. And now here we are talking about the history of insurance, which at the moment is not physical, is it? It's a digital business. How what an oxymoron it almost is. How are you using digital platforms to bring to life the history of insurance and interest and inspire people to kind of look at this industry?
Yeah, well, that's our friend at the moment. We're aiming for a physical museum, and we've got lots of plans. A Meanwhile museum for a while, then towards the end of the decade, we're looking at something more permanent. We want to get out around the UK physically on the ground, out and around the UK in cities where we're telling all sorts of insurance stories from everywhere. But at the moment, being a startup charity, we've been going a few years, digital is our friend. It's the way we're communicating to people. And we're doing it through a few ways. We write blogs regularly. We have a newsletter. Visit our website. You'll see how to sign up. So we write articles. I get volunteers to write articles as well. So it's not just me or my colleagues. I want people to submit articles to us that we can then post up on our website. Then we can refer to it through LinkedIn and so on. And that's a great way of engaging with people. But what we've been working on for the past 18 months, and in fact we launched our very last element to it back in the autumn. It's our online exhibition of fire insurance. And it tells the story of fire insurance right from the Great Fire of London, which kick-started fire insurance in this country. So it was Dr. Nicholas Barban, who set up the first fire insurance company in the Fire Office in the 1680s. And right through to, believe it or not, 1929. When there was the last fire that was put out by a fire insurance fire brigade in Worcestershire. So it really tells the story very well. And we've got different slides, we've got different pages, stories, narratives. And integrated into that, we've got videos, interviews with specialists, with academics, tour guides. And also there's a real community out there of certain demographic, retired specialists. They're collectors, and they collect, say, fire marks or fire equipment, historic items, but they know so much. They really know so much. So we've tapped into those people as well. Who's it aimed at? Is it aimed at insurance professionals? Is it aimed at younger generations? Do you have different kind of interpretations for different age groups? Yeah, we do. I mean, that was always a question. Who's your audience? You have to know that. So we wanted to engage, of course, the insurance profession and the general public, anyone who has an interest, but particularly young people. So within there, we've got a game you can play. Put out the fire. You can put out the Put out the Great Fire of London. There's also a video. You've got to see it, you've got to watch it, of our interpretation of Dr. Nicholas Barban, who was, in fact, you might think of him as a great man in the late Stuart period. He was a bit of a wheeler dealer. So go and search out that video.
I'll make sure it's in the show notes.
Do.
Episode.
It's a fantastic clip that we've used from young people to put their interpretation together of him. So we are trying to get different audiences. But when it comes to more schools, when it comes to education, that's definitely front and centre for us. And the online galleries plays their part to engage with schools.
That was my kind of next natural question, I suppose. The vision, the reason for the existence of the Insurance Museum from previous conversations that we've had, I think it's to inspire and educate and support the recruitment process of bringing, the really young kids to making insurance a career you choose, not one that you fall into. Is that
Yes.
right? Is there a wider purpose?
Absolutely. That's spot on. In fact, I was with our chairman yesterday, my boss, Reg Brown, who's a seasoned insurer. And he said it again last night. He said, I want to make it a career of choice. And again, from my background, heritage, people choose to go in that from an early age. You know what? I was 6 years old when I first thought, I want to be an archaeologist.
Did you really? At
Yeah,
6 years
6
old,
years
knew what
old.
you were. Do you know? I envy people that know. My dad once said to me, "It's very easy to know what you don't want, but there's
Yeah.
very few who know what you do want."
Yeah.
And I envy people that are born going, "I'm going to be a vet or a nurse or a doctor or an archaeologist."
Yeah.
I think it's fabulous.
Yeah, I mean, it was a crazy. My memory is a crazy thing that I was at school and there was a TV program on one sunny afternoon. I remember the afternoon, and it was a schools TV program, and up came this interview with an archaeologist and what this archaeologist did. And I skipped home, said to my mum, "I want to be an archaeologist," and she said, "Brilliant, that's fantastic." So then a bit of psychology went on. Is that she reinforced my wants and look at child psychology, and that's exactly what someone wants. And I followed it through. By the age of 22, I was digging. I was an archaeologist. But then, of course, at that age, I see other things I want to do, and off I go onto other things within heritage. But that's not unusual. Your dad's absolutely right. There is a stat that about, I think it's 36% of us have chosen our career by the age of 7.
Wow.
That sounds incredible. That's a third.
How does that work, though, with... There's another stat, which I have no idea what it is, but it's something ridiculous, like 60% of jobs that our children will be doing don't exist yet.
Oh, yes.
So
yeah.
that's the past data and the future turbulence.
Yes.
Kind of going, oh, how is this going to fit?
Yeah.
How's that going to work?
Well, you can still work in the same area. Say take archaeology.
Yeah.
When I started digging back in the early 90s, it's a different world to now. Field archaeology with more roles we wouldn't have even thought existed 25, 30 years ago, but you're still within that same area, and we grow and we develop, and with insurance, where will that be in 30 years'
It's a
time?
massively fast changing
Yes.
period at the moment, isn't it?
Absolutely,
with all
yes.
sorts of disruptors coming in.
Yeah, but think about those children. Are any of them saying, I want to be an insurer when I grow up, I want to work in insurance? And they don't even know what insurance is.
Or how fundamentally underpins the global economy.
Yeah.
And that is, you get people saying, I want to be an economist, I want to be an investment banker. Every bit as important. I think it's fascinating. In terms of challenges that you guys have faced over the last 3 years, and you mentioned COVID's been part of everybody's journey. What are the biggest challenges you faced in essentially explaining a very complicated industry with the aim to educate and inspire younger children? How do you do that?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, if you take a picture of insurance today to a class of 6, 7-year-olds, that's not going to work, is it? They're not going to get a bit of it. But, and again, my background, heritage, museums, within that, I've specialised in public engagement and particularly schools. And one lesson I have taught time and again in different places is the Great Fire of London. And I know it like the back of my hand. I really do, from all this teaching. And I work with these 6 and 7-year-olds. Every child in England, and possibly Wales as well, I'm not sure about Wales, they are all taught the Great Fire of London in year 2. Those 6 years old, those 7 years old, sometimes year 3. So that's a real opportunity for us. So if they're all being taught that, they're taught about how the fire started, what happened, Samuel Pepys burying his cheese and wine, moving it on to rebuilding of London, as well. And if we can just push that picture a bit further to what happened afterwards. Someone invented insurance, Dr. Barban. What is insurance? Well, it's quite easy. To explain it in fundamental terms, a lot of people give someone a little bit of money. So if something happens, like your house burns down, everyone agrees that they will pay for that house to be rebuilt. And then you can apply some simple mathematics around it as well. Okay, how much money will we give to this company or this mutual? Because one of the early fire insurance companies was a mutual. So, how much money will we give? Will that be enough? How much does it cost to rebuild a house? I mean, you don't need actual figures. You just need some nice round numbers that those 7-year-olds can work with.
One of the things that schools are doing, I've noticed, because I've got children, I know you do, is a lot of schools are taking a topic and then that topic infiltrates geography, maths, history, PE. For my sins, I had a period of life running a company teaching rugby to children, and we diversified, and I taught the Great Fire of London through yoga to year twos, and we did a big performance for the whole school. So, there's a way to take something like that and to fit it into PSHE, into all sorts of topics. And I think it's really a really good idea when schools are doing that. My kids obviously have come home and told me things about, what they've been learning, but it's a different perspective to, the Romans, I think, or history. And Ollie's telling me about it in geography, and I find it really fascinating.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Great Fire of London, hits so many topics there. There's history, of course. I mentioned mathematics, so you can bring mathematics into it if you're doing insurance with it. Geography, absolutely. London, what was London? Why was it so big? Why was it so dense? There's building materials, if you want to look at a bit of science. There's PSHE. So insurance, what is insurance? What do we do with insurance today? When we grow up, we all have insurance. And in fact, you could even extend that to insurance underpins our lives. From the moment you're born, you're covered by insurance.
So it is fascinating. What stories or thoughts, and we've touched on some of them here, would you recommend that those people who are in the insurance industry, who presumably listening to this podcast, talk to their children about? How do you talk about insurance to a 6-year-old and make it glamorous and exciting? And how?
How?
And I'll do it to mine. I'll let you know how I get on.
I mean, I suppose I'm at a bit of an advantage. My younger, well, both of them, but my younger one, he's just turned 10 now, but he's a natural mathematician. I don't know where he gets that from, certainly not me. But he's a natural mathematician. So if they've got a leaning towards maths, and, but actually by 10, kids are writing things off in their heads. I'm not good at art. They might well be good at art, they just think they're not. But it is just, let's do some maths. I would do with my little one, some simple maths around how insurance works. I'd love them to go into insurance. Now I've had a view of the market. I think it's a great career. I really do.
And incredibly varied, which I think a lot of people don't, a lot of kids certainly don't understand, and those outside the insurance industry. So using topical stories and delivering them in a way that shows the variety of aspects to the insurance industry or ways in which you can be involved. I interviewed somebody this week about internal auditing, risk and compliance, and it's a slightly different spin again on what risk and compliance normally is. Mm-hmm. So I think there's so many ways you can do it.
Yeah, I mean, for my older one, he's 14. I might not do the maths, but I'd be saying. One thing I've noticed about young people, teenagers,
if it's not on Snapchat or TikTok, they don't want to know.
Exactly, but they're passionate and they're motivated by, I've noticed, by inequality.
Yeah.
And they're passionate and motivated by global events such as the environment, global warming. And they're the kids, they're the people in 20, 30 years' time who are going to be dealing with these issues that are unravelling now, if not sooner. And let's look at the environment. Let's think, well, where are we going, and what's insurance doing about that? what are the big insurance companies? What are they looking to mitigate the impact of climate change? And when you start, you say, I'm picking that. That's a fantastic way to engage young people, in that key stage 3, key stage 4, perhaps a bit more sort of segment. That will really, and make it exciting, make it a real life workshop, real time workshop. That will really enthuse them.
Are you working with schools to talk to teachers about how they can be bringing insurance in to their daily lessons?
Yes, I mean, we will be. We're at the beginning of the process of this. Yeah. I've been talking to a few organisations, and we did a bit of consultation around our plans, what we want to do. But I did, there are companies that actually will get sponsorship from another company, say an insurance company, put a package about insurance together, then go into their partner schools. And I thought, hey, that's a great way of doing it. Let's look at that. Definitely work with the teachers. So at the moment we're digital, so we can produce digital online resources for teachers to use in their classroom. And say, well, for the City of London, I know there's a City of London Academies Trust, but there are many Academies Trusts around the country that we could work with, that have several that we can work with, that have several schools under their belts. So yeah, there's ways of doing it. And,
have you got hold of a copy of the national curriculum and looked at the key topics and then developed an insurance angle to them?
That's what I've been doing, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, the curriculum's up in my head because I've been doing it for so long now.
I have 3 children and it's not in my head.
I'm also lucky to have a wife who works in an academy trust, so multi-school academy trust, so that helps.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. Tell me a little bit about the Oral History Project, what that's about and how it's developing.
Yeah. Again, we're at the beginning of this. We're looking at the other end of the spectrum when it comes to age groups. Want to engage with people who are maybe retired, semi-retired, people who've been working insurance all their lives, 40 years. What have they got out of it? What was their working life like? And I heard a very interesting talk it was at the Insurance Institute for Manchester. They had an anniversary last year, 2023, we were present at. And it was 2 people talking, and forgive me, I can't remember their names, but hopefully they're listening, because they were talking about work styles between now and the 1980s. Brokers, insurance guys going out around clients, visiting clients. You jump in your car with your big file, you drive off to them, whereas now you press the Teams button and you're talking to them. All your files are on the screen next to you. It was a wonderful then and now comparison. I thought that's really clever. But it's that sort of life change, work change that we want to record. So there are the great events. What happened to Piper Alpha in the late 80s? What was the impact on your business? But how has that changed in the workplace? How has the workplace changed? What about women working in insurance in the 70s and the 80s? What was that like in a male-dominated environment? So there's lots of questions to ask and to preserve digitally. Now we may preserve those ourselves, or we can work with an archive who will look after them for prosperity, for forever. But there's also a question I'm going to put back at you, Sarah.
Oh, that doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, it's about this podcast. So think about, we're recording this podcast now, we'll put it out, people listen to it, that's great, we'll have a bit of feedback. Then next year you'll be thinking, wow, that was good, that's helped us move on. And then 3 years' time, it'll be distant memory and your business will be booming. The Insurance Museum will have its meanwhile space and will be booming. And then 5 years passes, the end of this decade, and we'll be looking back thinking, we've done really well this past 5 years, it's been great. What about this podcast? Where will it be in 5 years' time? Where will it be in 10 years' time? And I'm going to keep going. Where will it be in 100 years' time? When technologies have changed so much, will it still be accessible? You think of the big 12-inch CDs from the 1980s that we can no longer access.
My children do not understand the pain of taking a pencil and sticking into a tape recorder to rewind it.
Yeah, so this will become the Betamax in 20 years, this recording. It will become the Betamax video.
But do you know what is really interesting about podcasts that I've noticed? So over my podcasting life, and I've had a podcast now for about 3 years, the podcasts that I did at the beginning are still being listened to now.
Yeah.
So when I look at, the stats and all of that kind of stuff, what I've built is a digital asset with an awful lot of collateral.
Yes.
That when I had a stroke a few years ago and was out for 7 months, the downloads and the listenerships just kept going up and up and up. And I remember thinking then, wow, this is a really powerful medium. But also I think that you can multi-purpose this medium in so many different ways to protect its longevity, but also so that it reaches different people on different platforms and in different formats. And I think that's a really powerful way of getting a message out.
Yeah.
So, obviously I'm an advocate of podcasts.
Yeah, I mean, well, similar. I've got a blog and I haven't written anything recently, but my stats are still rolling on from the first one I wrote years ago. But let me again ask you this question. So with your podcasts, what about in 460 years' time? That document I saw, the contract of insurance for that boat that sailed from Venice round to London delivering its raisins, I fell in love with that. So what about in 460 years' time? Where will your podcast be?
I don't know, but I really would love to speak to somebody in 460 years' time that looks back at little old me having all these conversations.
Yeah. But if we record this now,
fascinating.
Your podcast, other podcasts, I'm not saying it's our job, but I'm going to put the question out there.
Yeah, I have no answer to it, but I think it's phenomenal. I've always loved the idea of doing one of those boxes where you put some things in it that, when you're like 10 and you dig it into the ground and you put a tree above it, and then when you're 40 you come and dig it up again and remember what 10-year-old Sarah wanted, and 10-year-old Sarah thought she was going to climb Mount Everest, visit the moon and go down to the Titanic. Those were my 3 goals from very, very young.
Brilliant.
I'm now 40 and I'm yet to do any of them, but right, last question back to you, because I could talk to you about this all day, because I am at heart a historian. I'm sure of it. I missed my calling. Why museum? I love the fact that you're bringing the history and the future together, but why museum? Why?
Yeah. Why an insurance museum even?
Yeah.
And people have asked that question because what we're doing now is fundraising, getting out there, getting people on board. Hopefully,
if you're listening, and
yes,
you've got some collateral that you want to put towards, get in touch.
We have a website, go and find it. But why a museum? And in fact, the whole of the museum sector has been thinking about this. When I put up the City of London Police Museum, when I put that together, people were saying at the time, is it just going to be a museum of truncheons? And I think when we say the Insurance Museum, I can see the same sort of frowns and people saying, is it just going to be a museum of policy documents and fire marks? It's not. Yes, we're going to have items. We're going to have original items in our museum. But you think about a museum not being a collection of objects, but being about a space where you go. And it's a space where we go to have fun. We take our friends with us, our family with us. We want to be entertained. We want to spend some really, lovely time with each other. And I learn along with my boys about whatever we're looking at, and it's great fun. Or you might take your friends in the afternoon, Saturday afternoon, or the evenings, or the lates. Or it could be that you do want to understand something a bit more and delve a bit deeper into your understanding about a theme, an object, or even a narrative. You want to get more out of it. So you go and have a look at these original items. So don't think of it as a collection, but it's more of a space where all this happens and all this takes place. And it's all about engaging. I mean, a real deep level of engagement, whether that is just having fun, understanding a bit more, spending valuable time, trying to understand other people's opinions. It's all of that. So that's what's at the centre of our museum. It's not going to be a museum of fire marks and policies. It's going to be a museum where we're going to tell all the stories: marine, aviation, fire, life assurance. We're going to look at those difficult stories as well around, say, the transatlantic slave trade. There's also other awful stories and tragic events that happen, such as Piper Alpha. and even looking east, Bangladesh, the famines that happened there. So it's a story, going to be a story, warts and all, and it's a place where we're going to celebrate insurance and promote insurance and get everybody in.
Well, I'm very inspired, and I look forward to keeping in touch and following your journey with this, because I think it's going to be really interesting, and I look forward to hearing that you guys are at My Kids School.
Brilliant, certainly will.
Thank you very much for your time, Howard. That was really interesting.
Oh, thank you, Sarah.
Thank you for tuning in to another enlightening episode of Changing the Conversation. If you enjoyed today's insights and want to stay connected with the latest industry trends, be sure to subscribe, rate and leave a review. Feel free to reach out to us on social media or through our website to share your thoughts and suggestions, or even to nominate someone whose contribution deserves to be heard. Until next time, this is Sarah Myers-Goff signing off from Changing the Conversation.